Joining me now is Treasury Secretary and former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen to talk about the economy and a new G7 agreement that she has led to cap Russia's oil profits to try to limit the billions that he can still pour into fighting the war in Ukraine. Madam Secretary, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Andrea, for having me.
I'm going to get to that very important G7 move, but let me ask you first your reaction to the jobs numbers.
Oh, I thought it was an excellent jobs report today. As you mentioned, 315,000 new jobs added in August. That brings the total since President Biden took office to nearly 10 million jobs. That's the fastest job growth in our history. But importantly, these jobs they were sourced from people who had been outside the labor market. So the strong job market and containing the pandemic is encouraging people to return to the labor market. Nearly 800,000 workers rejoined the labor market in August. And so those additional jobs were consistent with some loosening overall in labor market conditions. We have a really tight labor market, and the unemployment rate actually went up. So many of the new workers found jobs. Some are still looking and in the unemployment pool. And this is important to see our economy grow while containing inflation. So actually, for working age women, the labor force participation rate is now back up to levels we haven't seen since the pandemic began.
Secretary Yellen, what about the inflation concerns, though? Because, Fed Chair Jerome Powell was certainly very explicit in Jackson Hole that there has to be some pain as they continue to fight inflation. And so with these numbers, you're not really seeing the pain yet. So we have a long way to go in terms of, I know you're not going to talk about interest rates, but he's been very, very explicit about it. There's no secret as to he is determined to stop inflation. And this economy is still growing.
Well, you bet. Inflation remains too high, and it's really causing a great deal of suffering for American households. It's first and foremost the Fed's job to bring that down, and I know Chair Powell and his colleagues are committed to do that. As you said, I'm not going to comment on the steps they're taking to do it. We're trying to supplement those actions with actions we can take on the oil price front and also with respect to supply chains. The Inflation Reduction Act will bring down the cost of prescription drugs and keep health care affordable. And so it really is priority number one to bring inflation down.
How concerned are you about whether that's even possible without tipping the economy into a recession? It's a very difficult task, the soft landing, and not always achieved.
Well, it is a difficult task. I personally believe there is a path to accomplish that. We're at a point where we expect the pace of growth in job creation to slow to a more steady and sustainable rate. But when we see, as we did in this report, an increase in jobs that come from more people joining the labor force, that's important because it means the growth in our economy isn't creating pressure on inflation. So I'm hopeful that we can achieve a soft landing, but bringing down inflation is clearly a key priority.
So let's talk about the cap on oil prices that was announced today. You really led this. You've worked very hard on this, getting the G7 behind it. How does this work to really stop his war profits? He's now threatening to stop selling oil to the countries, to these countries who need Russian oil, who go along with it. Do you think he's bluffing?
Well, look, let me, by way of background, say that what's happened since Putin launched this brutal attack on Ukraine is that we've seen huge increases in energy and food prices that have been harming Americans and people all around the globe. And at the same time, higher oil prices have actually boosted, not diminished, Putin's revenue that he needs to fight this war. Our objective since day one has been to deprive Putin and Russia of the revenue they need to conduct this war while shielding Americans and citizens around the world from the impact of the war in the form of higher energy prices. So the actions that were announced today really serve to accomplish both goals, to diminish Putin's revenues and harm his ability to wage war against Ukraine, and at the same time to help Americans and citizens in countries all around the world, including low and middle income countries that are really suffering from boosts in energy and food prices. So today, the G7 finance ministers announced that they will implement a comprehensive ban on the provision of services, things like insurance, trade financing, and brokering that are involved and enable the maritime transportation of Russian oil. And provision of these services by companies based in our countries will be completely banned unless the oil is purchased at a price below a, let's call it a price cap level that will be jointly determined by the coalition countries. In other words, purchases of Russian oil will only be able to access these critical services needed to ship maritime oil as long as the oil is sold below a capped price. And I want to point out that the G7 countries and the European Union are critically important suppliers of these services. For example, close to 90% of insurance for maritime oil is provided by the EU and the UK. So the price cap will be set at a level that will continue to make it profitable for Russia to produce and sell oil. So they will have an incentive to do that. It will be a price that they have chosen to sell oil historically, that it's profitable. And I believe they will find it greatly to their advantage to sell oil even at the capped level. Their revenues will be lower, which is what they want. We want to see. So it'll harm their ability to wage war, but they will do much better economically if they choose to sell into the price cap than if they were to shut in that oil. Of course, they'll be able to sell some oil around the price cap. We understand that. Countries will be able, to some extent, to procure these critical services at greater cost elsewhere. But importantly, even countries that don't join the coalition or implement a price cap, their bargaining power in bargaining with Russia for over oil prices will be enhanced by the existence of this cap. And frankly, Andrea, we're already seeing this initiative pay off because countries that are buying Russian oil are signing deals with Russia to sell oil at greatly discounted prices. So we're having an impact. And if Russia were to choose to shut in their oil, I know they've threatened that, not only will it not be in their interest in terms of revenues, they have aging oil equipment and oil fields, and it will create permanent harm to their ability to restart oil production after they shut down those fields. So we believe that Russia will, their revenues will be reduced, but they'll continue to sell into the price cap. And we will seek to broaden our coalition. Of course, the larger the coalition is, the more effective it will be. But even with the coalition of the size we have, this will make a real impact on Russia's revenues and protect countries all around the world from spiking oil prices.
Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, on a major new initiative against Vladimir Putin. Thank you very much. Good to see you.